the whole crowd is cheering because the Browns didn't lose. I mean, they didn't win, but they didn't lose.
Look at all the beautiful people in the crowd. That's a big shout out to the people in the back.
Actually, half the crowd left because when they got down by 2 scores, people were like, well, same old Browns, and they took off to their cars.
I was at a Browns party, and
you left her.
No, but I would say, let's say 20% of the people were like, this game's over, and gave it one of those, and very angrily walked out of the place.
Time to go cut the grass.
So what are we talking about today, Captain?
Well, I mentioned a while ago that there was a new theory that one of my buddies was working on as far as the West Memphis 3 case.
Okay.
And I've been putting off talking about it for a while because that said buddy showed me some information. I thought it was very fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's one thing to have a theory. It's another thing when you actually have police reports or interview statements that back up that theory. And I wanted him to run with this theory. The problem is, and I wish I knew how it worked, because West Memphis 3 is a case that is very, it's one of your pet cases, one of my pet cases. I wish I knew how it worked, though, because you meet all these awesome true crime people, and everybody has their own cases.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not one of his. This is one that he's looked into a little bit. He's listened to some podcasts about it, watched some documentaries about it, but it's not his cup of tea for whatever reason.
Okay.
And
so he didn't really dive into the few of the details that you may have asked him to do so.
Yeah, because I thought, hey, he's going down this rabbit hole. Keep going down the rabbit hole and get back with me, because, one, we're covering a new case every week, so it's kind of hard to take a couple days to dive into another case that we've already covered.
Mm-hmm. So he comes to you and says, hey, this is an idea I have. I was kind of looking at the West Memphis 3 case. This is an idea I had. I'll tell you how it kind of works for me. And I get what you're saying there, because sometimes to do the research end and to try to chase a lead that maybe you created yourself, that you may have stumbled upon yourself, it's quite the chore. And so if you're not fascinated by the case, if you're not really into it, let's say, you can easily find yourself where you're like, well, I'm bored, or I'm not finding anything. There's nothing to find here. You can give up hope and turn the ship around pretty quickly if it's a case that you're just not into. If it's one that you are majorly into, it's completely the opposite. I've seen people become obsessed, and there's movies out there and books out there about individuals falling in love with a case, and they're almost alienated from their families because they alienated them in the process of becoming so obsessed with a case. And actually, we see that in the Robert Graysmith is a great example, the guy that wrote the Zodiac book.
Right.
I mean, he almost, I don't know if he ended up getting a divorce or if it came pretty darn close. But
why did you get a divorce? Why are we here today?
The Zodiac. I'm another victim of the Zodiac. Graysmith turned into like this almost Howard Hughes type that kind of locked himself in his apartment, and he was surrounded by stacks of paper of his own work and research on the Zodiac case. I
love Howard Hughes.
So you have somebody that presented a possible theory or an outside of the box theory, let's say. Yeah. I don't know much about this, but what I do know and what fascinates me about it is when I look at some of these bigger cases, and what I mean by bigger cases is cases that it's easy to find a mountain, or let's even say mountains of information out there. Mm-hmm. Jack the Ripper, West Memphis 3, Jean Bonnet, Ted Bundy.
Jean Bonnet.
And so West Memphis 3, there is just a wealth of knowledge and information out there that is to be found and to read through and sift through.
Well, and the actual records, too.
Yeah.
The Callahan.
Correct.
Was it called?
The Callahan website.
Yeah.
That's the best way to refer to it. The thing here is, though, what I love about these big cases, I kind of have this thought as to suspects, and I generalize them into 3 different categories. One, we have known suspects. And what I mean by known suspects are people that are regularly known to the case. So in the West Memphis 3 case, we would have obviously the 3 teenagers that were convicted and then later released, as well as their parents and people close to the 3 victims. Okay?
Yeah.
And then we also have the unknown victims. Okay, I'm sorry, the unknown suspects, right? So that would be persons that
I was going to say you're going down a crazy rabbit hole. There's unknown victims. Oh.
This would also be people that are just not known at all. Okay, and whether that be by name or likeness or anything like that, they're just not known to us, the people that follow the case, the people that have looked into it, the armchair detectives. This would be the unknown suspect. And then you have a group that falls right in the middle between the two. You have people that are known to the case, but not generally known, not to the general public, not to everybody, only the people that really dove deep into the case, but their likeness or names are known to people that have spent the time to follow through in this. The thing that I like about what little I've heard about this theory that I find fascinating is it kind of pulls a person from each one of those categories to kind of tell this story of the theory that you're about to tell us.
Right. So, I don't know what the best way to break this down is because I haven't really thought about it too much, but I always thought that there was one person in this case that didn't make any sense. A lot of times when you hear there's certain things that maybe Damien would say or Jason Baldwin would say, definitely things that Jesse Miskelly said that you just thought, what the hell is that all about? And then a lot of weird stuff with the detectives. And then we've had this, we went from these 3 boys are guilty, the West Memphis 3 being guilty, to they're innocent, to maybe this stepfather was the murderer, maybe this other stepfather was the murderer, a bunch of different theories. I think there's probably something in the middle, but there was one character to me in this story that never made any sense to me, and that's Vicky Hutchinson.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people will, and I think when I first brought up this theory to you off the record,
mm-hmm.
you said, well, yeah, she's in the police department and she has these charges. So Vicky Hutchinson was, I can't remember exactly what the charges were, but she had like some bounce checks or something.
So I actually think that she had bounced some checks before this charge, but what she was facing on this occasion was she worked at a gas station in the West Memphis area. Okay. I believe it was West Memphis. That's not important. She worked at a gas station. And what they found was several of the customers were calling the gas station and saying, hey, look, I'm getting charges to my credit card for things I didn't purchase, for services I didn't use, and it's getting charged to me from your gas station. Well, she was like a cashier, sales clerk, whatever you want to call them. She worked there. She would get this information, and then she was ultimately taking people's credit card information and running it probably to buy things for herself.
Right. Now, these would be small items because it'd just be a convenience store, so we're not talking about a lot of money.
No, we're not talking about a lot of money, but we may be talking about a lot of transactions that could add up to a lot of money in the long run. Mm-hmm. The thing here is the way that this works is the owners of the gas station, they were able to say, hey, when Vicky Hutchinson's working, that's when these transactions are taking place. Mm-hmm. So therefore, she must be the one that is illegally running these credit cards. And so they had her charged with such. And on the day of the discovery of the bodies of the 3 8-year-old victims in West Memphis, mm-hmm. she's sitting in a police officer's, I believe it was a detective. She's sitting in his office, and they're talking about these credit card charges.
Yeah, so she was charged with these, and then she started talking the day that the boys are found. And that's kind of where the story kind of stops there. Well, it doesn't stop there, but it's like, well, then Vicky Hutchinson started talking to the cops, and then she started giving them information. And then she said, hey, I know Jesse Miss Kelly, so maybe I could get in good with Damien. Again, this is the day that they're found.
Right.
The day that they're found, somebody is bringing up Damien Eccles' name. So, again, you can sit there and say he said some goofy, Damien Eccles said some goofy shit at a baseball game or a softball game or whatever. The day that the boys were found, they went missing one day, they're found the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So she's bringing up all this stuff, and then she she has some statements, but she never makes it to trial. I don't think she ever becomes an eyewitness in the actual trial. But what I was watching the other day, and I've watched it several times in the last few months, but it's her son, and it's his confession tapes, basically.
Right.
Now, he claims to this day that he doesn't remember anything. And basically everything that he was telling the cops back then was a lie. That's roughly his statement.
Right.
Now, these are very detailed accounts, but also the cops are leading him constantly. But he definitely knows some stuff. So here's where it starts out. Vicky Hutchinson sees all the boys after school. So she's an eyewitness of seeing all 4 of the boys. Right? I'm going to say 4 because her son was there.
Okay.
And the whole thing was that they wanted for her son to go to hang out with them because of a Boy Scout meeting that day.
Okay.
Now, Boy Scout meetings normally happen on a Wednesday. It was not a Wednesday. So therefore, she's like, no, there's no Boy Scout thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe Michael Moore's father was the leader, the den leader, or whatever they call it.
He was involved in some form. I don't know if he was in fact the leader, but
right. So what we do know is he's
absent on this day. He's gone. He's off driving. He drove a long haul truck,
right,
and he was out of town working on that day.
So there is some reason. Now, it could just be to play or whatever. It doesn't have to be sinister. But what I'm saying is there's some reason that these 8-year-old boys are trying to get their friend to come play with them. And when that's not working, right,
mm-hmm.
they then say, can he come play for the next couple hours? And she says, she says so in this statement. So let me try to find this statement.
So where in the course of that night or that afternoon are we talking about?
This is right after school. So Vicky says in her statement, I was waiting where the teachers park on the side of Weaver Elementary and watching for Aaron. It was approximately 15 after 3. And Michael Moore came up to one side of my truck and Christopher Byers to the other. And Aaron, close to them. And they were telling me, Miss Vicky, there's a Cub Scout thing tonight, and Aaron needs to go to Michael's father's, their troop leader, and Michael was really insistent on Aaron going, and they kept saying that there was a Cub Scout thing.
Right.
And then she says, and so she said, no, this is, this is Wednesday night. Cub Scouts are tomorrow. Okay, so Cub Scouts were Thursday. It's Wednesday night. And they kept going on. Finally, they got it through. They figured out that he wasn't going to be able to go. So then they wanted him to go play. And he said, well, then can Aaron come to my house and you can pick him up in 2 hours, which she had done frequently. So she thinks that he assumed that by changing the story, that would get her to say yes.
Okay.
So I think one of the things that people are missing when they're researching this case is there was obviously something going on. Now, what that is, I'm not for sure of, and I don't think any of us know what it was. Is it possible that these boys were supposed to meet somebody in Robin Hood Hills?
Yes, 100% possible.
So what's interesting to me is she tells Aaron, you're not going. And she tells the cops, I took Aaron back to our house. And then Aaron tells her, I'm going to run over to my grandpa's house or uncle's house or whoever's house.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't. He goes over and hangs out with Michael Moore, Christopher Byers, right? Now, there's multiple eyewitnesses. If you look through the reports, there's multiple eyewitnesses that see one boy on a bike, see two boys on a bike, see three boys on a bike, and there's multiple eyewitnesses that see four boys on the bike.
Mm-hmm. Now,
where would that fourth boy be? That would be Aaron, her son, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and based off of her reports, guess where her son was? Over hanging out with Michael Moore, Christopher Byers. So this becomes, to me, something more that we have to look at. When did he leave?
Mm-hmm.
When did he get picked up? Now we have a police report that states, now let me pull this up again, sorry. But we have a police report that states at 6:33, I believe this is when the call is received, that on North 14th, there's a blue Toyota with no license plate, and I cannot read what it says. It looks like a LBLM, and I don't know what that stands for.
Mm-hmm.
So roughly about 6:30, and if anybody knows anything about this timeline, this is roughly around the times that possibly the boys are murdered. Roughly around that time, right?
Could be, yes.
So we have this blue Toyota, and talking with my buddy, this blue Toyota was seen. Now that's North 14th Street. This is in the neighborhood of Michael Moore, Christopher Byers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's driving erratically. And now what becomes interesting now, it doesn't state what it is other than it's a blue Toyota. So later on, if you go through Vicky Hutchinson's interview, it says, Ridge asked her, do you have a vehicle of your own? Vicky says, yes, I do. Ridge says, what kind? She says, it's 77 Toyota pickup, blue. So I don't know if it's her driving around. What I heard from my buddy that was diving into it, this police report or this call log about the blue Toyota in the neighborhood, they claim it was driven by a black man.
Okay. Now,
there's conflicting stories that at the time of the murders, Vicky did not have a boyfriend. Mm-hmm. Then there's other stories that state that she did. And I've been trying to find that, again, with minimal time and minimal effort to look into this idea. Is it possible that she was dating a man that was sent to pick up her son? And did something go down? And was he involved in some way? Or who's this guy in this blue pickup anyways, driving erratically through the neighborhood?
Right.
You know, if you're driving away from a scene and you're maybe covered in blood, are you driving away erratically? And then do you end up at the, Mr. Bojangles and covered in blood in the female's bathroom? So that's kind of the idea. But where it gets more interesting is if you listen to the interviews with her son, Aaron, in the police station, and there's some conflicting reports here, but she goes in to talk about some checks or some, not checks. She goes in to talk about some credit card charges. And I can't confirm this yet, but I believe that Aaron Hutchinson is the one that led because the boys weren't found till after this meeting. And I believe that Aaron led them to because Aaron was with her the day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so again, I believe this would have been, he would have not been in school based off the time of the meeting with the police officer.
Right.
So for whatever reason, his 3 buddies, 2 of his best friends go missing. The next day he's not in school. The next day he's in the police station. The next day his mom is talking about these credit card charges. The next day he is leading the authorities to the area. Maybe not to the exact spot because we know how that worked. What we do know is that they were searching a lot in front of the, what is that called? There's like a tunnel or a tube or
there's
some pipe.
There's a pipe that goes over
pipe.
the water.
And they weren't really searching past the pipe. And from these reports, it makes it seem that Aaron Hutchinson is the one that told law enforcement, you need to search past the pipes because that's where we'd hang out. That's where our clubhouse was. Mm-hmm. That's where we'd be hanging out all the time. And then they go back there and then they see the shoe floating. And that's how they find the boys. And then if you listen to his statements, again, these are doctored. This is the law enforcement leading this 8-year-old to try to get details on these 3 murders of these 3 boys. Again, I'd argue with anybody that says that these 3 boys are guilty. Damian Eccles, Jesse Miskelly, Jason Baldwin. If those 3 boys are guilty, then we'd have some eyewitnesses that saw all 3 of them together at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And there is none that I can find that state that these 3 boys were even together. Now, the ones that think they're guilty don't get your panties in a bunch because that doesn't mean that all 3 of them did it, if that makes any sense. But we have no eyewitnesses that saw all 3 of those boys together. So that's kind of the rabbit hole, and I'm kind of putting it out there for anybody that's interested in this case to start possibly going down this rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
Because what the questions I have and what I had for my buddy was, is there a statement? We have a lot of police reports and a lot of interviews and a lot of pages of Vicky Hutchinson's interviews. Does it state anywhere who she was dating?
Mm-hmm.
And was that man a white man or was that a black man? And then this report about the blue Toyota in the neighborhood. Was it a pickup truck? Was it a car? Was it who was driving it?
Right.
Because that's another thing that I'm very unclear on. So that's where I'm kind of at with it. But I kind of wanted to just toss it out to the universe, and there's a lot smarter people that could dive into this and get answers.
Well, I like this for several reasons, and just so we're clear, you're not stating, "Hey, this is my theory. This is a hard and fast theory. I'm sticking to it." This is hey, this is what's been presented to me. Yes, it's a bit flimsy. Are there some holes? Of course. Can anybody provide information that helps this theory along or that shoots it down?
Yeah, and what I am claiming is, I mean, when did Paradise Lost come out?
I don't know offhand.
Okay, but
94, I think.
Okay, but after a couple of the documentaries and a couple times of looking into this case, mm-hmm. I'm telling you from the beginning there was something in my body that just told me Vicky Hutchinson. Not saying she's a murderer. What I'm saying is there's something definitely not right here.
Okay,
and we know that the police. Okay, look, the police interviewed her son. And they used none of this during the trial.
Right.
None of it. And when you listen to her boy talk, it's like, to me, that, that's your smoking gun. If you're the police, if you have Jesse Miskelly confessing, and that's what you're going to use against Jason and Damian, then this is your backup.
Mm-hmm.
And the cops knew there was something not right about this. Either they knew that they were writing the story and they didn't want to try to get busted, like, oh man, we want to see how good this kid is under pressure. He's not so good, so we can't have him lie for us.
Mm-hmm.
And man, there's a bunch of holes in this Vicky Hutchinson, right? Because, well, she did this thing with the checks, and then she did this thing with the credit cards, and so she's a thief, and now we caught her in some more lies, and we can't put her on the stand either.
Mm-hmm.
And then she comes out later saying that everything she said was a lie.
Right.
Why are you lying? Why are you getting involved anyways?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I've always dismissed it because every time I bring her up, I get the same story. Well, she was there on credit card charges. And so the reason, that's why she got involved, because if she told the cops anything, then maybe she'd get out of these charges. One, I don't think the charges would be much. That's another thing. Was she ever charged with the credit card charges? Because they didn't use her testimony. They didn't use any of her information in the trial. So did she get not charged with those credit card fraud charges?
So here's some information going off of memory here. Regarding Vicky and the charges, the credit card charges, it's my understanding that she was there to discuss making the charges go away. And the reason being was, I think we have a situation where the people she worked for at the gas station, while they didn't trust her to work there any longer and they wanted her fired, they fired her from there, right, and they threatened her with charges. I think they were, because they were the ones that brought the charges against her, I think they were solely in charge of if these charges get brought to trial. And I think what went down is they told the police, hey, if we could get her to apologize to our customers and repay all the money that she stole from them,
we won't.
Maybe we shouldn't pursue these charges, law enforcement, because she's a young single mother and we feel bad for her on some level. Mm-hmm. And keep in mind, this is 1993. Things did work that way back then, especially in smaller communities.
Yeah, things still work that way.
Right. So my understanding is she's there already with the idea that there's a possibility that she can make these charges go away if she's cooperative and works with the police.
Right. Which makes it even weirder that she's involved in this case.
Well, the thing here is, I wonder if there was a bit of a snowball effect, and I wonder that Vicky's just not a very trustworthy person. And I think that we may have had something that started off as a small, tiny little seed. It gets planted, and then it grew into a huge, enormous, ugly tree is what it turned into. Because for whatever reason, her son is there with her during the course of this meeting. I don't know offhand the exact time of the meeting, but it was the day that the victims were discovered.
Mm-hmm.
And she provides information, and it's very short little information to the detectives that she's speaking with. And she says, look, my boy knew those boys. Maybe he could help you. And the way that this conversation starts off is, well, okay, he's the same age. He goes to school with some of them. Okay, let's talk to him.
Right. But again, the way it's presented is just like you said. He's the same age. He goes to school with them. Like, she's crazy, for one, because the conversation should have been, yeah, they went missing after school. At what point are people all out and about searching for them? We're only talking about a few hours. The boys that went missing were basically begging her or coming up with a lie about a Boy Scout meeting so their son could, her son could come over.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe that's bullshit. Who knows? But I don't think it's bullshit. And so when they're talking to, again, that's what you should be saying. My son is best friends with these boys.
Right.
Maybe he can help you. He used to go play with them.
Mm-hmm.
But when the boy then says, oh, no, you got to go back here and look for him. And he states more things.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to find that report again so I could bring up what he said. But like I said, it basically points to the idea that Aaron Hutchinson led law enforcement to the area that the boys would be found.
Well, possibly. I think you and I are remembering this differently, because the way I remember it is that they have this sit-down meeting, Aaron and his mother, Vicky, to discuss these charges. And at some point during the course of this meeting, it's brought up that Aaron is good friends with some of the missing kids.
Right.
And they talk kind of at length. This is not a short meeting, but it's my understanding that by the end of the meeting, now maybe we're missing a lot of things, maybe that we're not told a lot of things for good reason, but it's my understanding that the detective interviewing Vicky because he was in a closed door meeting, did not realize that during the course of that meeting, the boys had been found. He's notified at the end of this meeting that said, hey, we found those 3 boys. They're dead in Robin Hood Hills.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way I remember it. So if it did go down that way, and if we do know everything about that meeting, then Aaron didn't lead the police to the bodies. And if he did tell them anything that might provide them information to find the victims, it didn't come out until after the victims were found. That this detective didn't relay this information to anybody until after he was aware that they were found.
Right, if that's how it went down.
Correct.
But I mean, and that's kind of what has been told, and that's kind of what we're led to believe for so long. And like I said, the things that I was reading, again, could be wrong, but it leads me to believe that Aaron is the reason why they search further back. And again, why is he out of school?
Yeah, that's weird. I didn't think about that till you said that today. If the meeting took place when I think that it did, he would have been out of school that day, and I don't know why that would have been.
Well, it's because he was with them. That's why. And then the other thing that I can't wrap my head around is I can't remember off the top of my head if Aaron, her son, was supposed to be at her grandpa's or if he was going to go to his uncle's or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a place that he'd go to a lot. But for whatever reason, you wouldn't let him go play with his friends, but you're going to let him go to his grandpa's or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And when she claims at some point she starts looking for him.
Right.
Can't find my son, and then I start calling, or maybe he left and didn't tell anybody. And when he came back or whatever, he says, I was at my uncle's or grandpa's. But when she calls this person, that he's not there.
Mm-hmm.
Again, so was that your car that went looking for your son because you couldn't find your son for a couple hours?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't find your son for a couple hours and you're driving around in that neighborhood, where's your alibi? And if you have an alibi, is it a false alibi? I think this angle needs to be looked at more. I mean, like I said, I wish I had the time, to dive into it more. But I just always thought, and I don't want to like throw too much shade on her, but
no, I think you can.
Water deaths are more female driven than male. So I'm just saying, who's in that car that they see driving erratically? And is it a pickup truck or is it a sedan? Is it her car? Is it not her car? Is it her and her boyfriend? Is it her and somebody else looking for her boys? And if her son was there when they were killed and any of his story is correct, I mean, it just seems like a lot of details for the kid to make up completely, or a lot of details that the cops made up and told him to say.
Right.
It just seems like a lot for an 8-year-old. So it's like some of what he's saying I think is true, and the rest I think they're leading. Was he there? And then if he was there, then why didn't they kill him?
Well, and I think the weird thing here, and this is why you have to throw a theory out there, a theory like this out there for people to take a look at, to examine, see if they can find anything and add weight to it, for several reasons. First of all, we know, what are the facts that we do know? Vicky Hutchinson is a liar, 100%. There's no way to get around that. She has said on record she lied about the things she told the police back then. As far as her testifying, I do know that she testified in some form of court. I don't think it was actually at either of the famous trials, that being of Jesse Misskelley or when Damien and Jason were tried together. Mm-hmm. She didn't testify in those, but it's my understanding that later at the hearings to try to, they're basically appeals, right? So at the appeal hearings, she did testify at some of those. Her story changes all the time. And then later she says, I lied back then. So we know she's a liar, first of all.
Right.
The other known fact is this. It's what information is out there says that Aaron Hutchinson did not give detailed information about the murders or who he had expected or suspected of murdering the three kids that he was friends with on the initial time of talking with law enforcement.
On the initial interview. Yeah.
And the way that this went down, from my general understanding of it, is he gave some very vague statement to the police that said something to the effect of he was hanging out with some of the kids, that he had saw maybe they go into Robin Hood Hills, or at least one or two of them went into Robin Hood Hills. Mm-hmm. And at some point he says something to the effect of, nobody knows what happened to them but me. And later, the police recorded this. And later they used this when they were interrogating Jesse Misskelley. Mm-hmm. And they played that short little sentence of a little boy's voice saying, nobody knows what happened to them but me. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of a ghostly, haunting statement, a ghostly, haunting thing for somebody like Jesse Misskelley to hear being played over.
It's a crazy thing for an 8-year-old to say.
Saying over and over again. And then my understanding is that once Jesse Misskelley, mm-hmm. once they are able to spin and roll and help paint the canvas of what ends up being his confession to the police, that then the police took the confession,
right,
and they used pieces of it to try to get Aaron Hutchinson to say similar things or the same thing.
Right, but what is weird is in Aaron Hutchinson's story, he's there. And Jesse Misskelley's story, Aaron Hutchinson's not there.
Right. And that's a big problem for law enforcement and for the prosecutors. And then second of all, so they never could get Jesse Misskelley to say that Aaron Hutchinson was there. They never could do that. Mm-hmm. They couldn't get Aaron Hutchinson to say, hey, would have anybody have known that you were there? And he does say something to the effect of, I was going to be killed, or they saw me and I was going to be killed and I ran away. The problem with Aaron Hutchinson's story is multiple things. One, he's 8 years old, and easily, just as easily as Jesse Misskelley was manipulated by law enforcement, he too would be easily manipulated by people, authoritative figures.
Yeah,
right?
Right. And one of his stories, though, is that there's more than 3 people back there. At one point of the interview, there's more than 3 people back there. And at one point when they're talking about Damien, he's like, yeah, Damien wasn't there.
Right.
And then you go, wait, what?
No, and the things he was saying that he witnessed did not happen.
Right, but this is the bullshit about this whole goddamn case, though, is first of all, if you don't have these shitty-ass investigators trying to lead everybody to the answers they think that is the truth, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, who knows what Aaron would have said if they just said, we want you to tell us what you can remember. That's it. Mm-hmm. If they came and they said right to my face, we didn't alter his story at all. We didn't lead him at all. Bullshit, you piece of shit. You did.
Well, I think...
And you did, but they did the same thing with Jesse Misskelley. And then they did the same thing with also Vicky Hutchinson. So now we know Vicky Hutchinson's a liar. We also know... but there's so many people in this case that are just lying their freaking heads off. And then on top of that, the 3 guys that get out, the 3 guys that make Alfred pleads that, they're guilty. I'm guilty, but I get a claim my innocence, and I get out of prison. And all 3 of those assholes said that they're going to work hard and they're going to have justice for the 3 victims and justice for the family, and they're going to work hard to solve this case. And what have they done? I think there's only been one of the 3 that's actually done an interview that would provide any information. and one won't even leave west of Memphis, and the other one, walks around in interviews with sunglasses like he's some fucking celebrity, and he won't answer any questions. He'll write a bunch of books about fucking moon water, but he won't do any interview to get any information about that town, what was happening. Did he know something? Did he hear something? I think they're just holding back a lot of information, and then they point the finger at one stepfather and then the next stepfather. But then once they get out, they're free and they don't do shit. And you still got 3 boys dead and nobody doing anything about it.
Well, we also have some things to consider. These individuals, the 3 that have been released, are, from my understanding, still under probation. They're still having to live their lives under the rules of probation that was set up for them.
Okay, so is there a rule under probation that you're not allowed to talk about your case?
You might not be able to interfere. You might not be able to do anything that might be considered interference.
Yeah, but what about all the money that you raised and all these private investigators? Are you not allowed to be? Are these private investigators, do they have to stop because now you're on probation? And how long are they on probation for? I mean, they've been out since what, 2012?
Maybe they're off probation now. I thought they all received 10 years probation.
Okay, so they wouldn't be off yet.
Right. I thought they all received 10 years probation. So there's a few issues with, and actually I'm going to take the opposite stance here. I actually see and understand why they might not be actively participating in the investigation. One, there is no legit investigation. As far as the state of Arkansas is concerned, it's a solved and closed case.
Right.
So there's one issue. Then 2, let's look at them individually. So it's my understanding that of the 3, most likely Jason Baldwin has been somewhat active in this case.
Right.
Jesse Miskelly won't even do an interview. And I actually think that there's very good reason why he doesn't, and actually why I would suggest to him, if he's listening, not to do an interview. He's been
same thing. I'd suggest the same thing.
He's been tricked already multiple times, and I think that out of just playing it safe, he's going to go. I think that here's the vibe I get from that dude. And mind you, I've never spoken to him, never will, because he doesn't talk to people. But I actually think he doesn't even have a phone or a cell phone. The vibe I get from this dude is he's a pretty regular, nice dude. And I think he wants to talk to people. I think he wants to share his experience. I think he's frightened. I think he's been beaten into submission mentally and emotionally regarding this. And I think he's frightened and feels, hey, no matter who I talk to, they're going to try to trick me. We already know that he couldn't discern. He couldn't tell the difference between his defense attorney and the police and the detectives.
Right. Again, that look, there's 3 guys that were put away for this. And they were put away because one of them, it just has a very low IQ and it is very low functioning. So, yes, but the other 2. Again, maybe Jason has been involved somewhat, and I know he's done a couple interviews, but it's not enough. I mean, if Jason, what they claim in their documentary, what they claimed was that Jason didn't want to do the plea. He didn't want to do any plea deal.
Right.
Okay. But then they all said, but what we realized. Well, and they had all this bullshit too, Oh, Damien's he's suffering on death row. He's not going to live to see this go to trial, which was a bunch of bullshit and a bunch of lies.
Well, maybe. So there's several problems with that too. One, if they would have faced a new trial, which that's what they were pushing for, it could have been a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years before that new trial would have came about.
No. And then I heard some arguments that if they really wanted to play the system, they were not going to see a trial for 6 years.
Right. And then on top of that, let's say, my estimates of 1.5 to 3 years, your estimate of 6 years. I've heard that too, 5, 6 years. Mm-hmm. So anywhere at the minimum, what I've heard is 1.5 years. At the maximum, maybe 6 years. Then on top of that, I have read cases where individuals have been later cleared by DNA evidence to release them from prison for a murder that they supposedly, were accused of committing years ago. Mm-hmm. And these individuals then, depending on what state you're in, even if you're cleared, that doesn't mean they're like, all right, well, give him back his belongings and send him home in 15 minutes. In some states, you still sit in prison for another 9-10 months afterwards before they release you. So,
well, no, and again, if it was stated in their documentary, if it was stated to me that, hey, we didn't do this and we want out of jail, right? Mm-hmm. Or out of prison. They got out. You're out of jail. You're out of prison. You're off of death row. You get a lead. You're going to have you're a free man, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, you took an Alfred plea. I get it. There's a lot of good people that would take that plea deal. One, it works out for the state because you can't sue them. So they don't have to pay you millions and millions of dollars for being in jail. If that's all they stated in their documentary, fine. Go about your life. Mm-hmm. Write your shitty books, right? I can't say they're shitty. They're actually...
No,
Damien's a great writer. I'm just really pissed off is what it comes out to. And
Dark Spell's a very good book. Not written by Jason Baldwin, but he assisted in the writing.
No, but I met with Damien but I don't feel like... I feel like in their documentary that they stated that if they get out, they could do more damage on the case. They could find more information. They could solve this but it's going to be easier to do if they're out of jail.
Right. The problem
now it's 6 years later, and it's like
no, but that's the problem we have with media is that, and actually I shouldn't say media because they're just doing their jobs to record and report on what's going on, and that was big news, so they need to be there reporting. But the problem is, I guess, public perception. And we have to keep in mind, and I had to retool myself on this one too, in this specific instance, where we have these guys that are sitting there before they're released or just after being released, saying, "Look, we're gonna right this ship. We were wrongfully convicted, and we believe we have some evidence that might provide a lead to who actually did this or the persons that actually did this." And again, we can work this better on the outside.
And maybe they're working on something.
What I have to remind myself, though, is what information did they know at that time when making that statement? You know what I mean? Did they know they were going to be on probation for 10 years? Mm-hmm. Did they know that they would have to ask permission to leave the state of Arkansas? Did they know that if they did anything, if they so much as get arrested for... I mean, if they have certain violations... they could find themselves back in prison for life sentences. Mm-hmm. And according to, the probation. So what I'm getting at is... yeah,
but it's also an easy thing to stand behind. And I don't know what their rules and regulations of probation, but I know that Jason Baldwin had talked about the case. Mm-hmm. So, we can't hide behind this. I wanted to hear, Bob Ruff interview Damien Echols, and it was just a load of shit is what it was. It was just a waste of goddamn time.
But it goes to Damien's statement of his knowledge of the case. His statement has always been, I don't know anything about the case. I don't have any suspects. I don't know of any suspects. I don't know how much I can talk about the case because I didn't do it. And I didn't know the victims. Right, I didn't know the area. I didn't know any of the suspects.
Right, but in Paradise Lost, you can, in number 2, you can throw Hobbs under the bus, and then in your documentary, you can throw. Well, I got that backwards, didn't I? You threw Byers under the bus, and then you threw Hobbs under the bus.
Well did other people.
No, which I understand. I get it. At least you're trying. At least you're saying something. But so you get out of jail, you make the documentary in 2012, and now you're telling me in 2018 I don't know anything? You don't know anything. You've been studying this case. How long were you in jail for? How long were you studying this case? They know more than what they're telling us. And again, I'm just disappointed because I thought here might be, maybe these guys were arrested unjustly. Maybe they're on death row unjustly. But if they get out, maybe they can also prove something to the world that not only did you let me out, not only did I claim that I was innocent, but I put together enough information that you probably could go after somebody. And you might not go after them because there's somebody already convicted of this crime, but we're going to put that out. And again, I don't know if they're working on it. I don't know if they say, hey, we have some stuff, but we don't want to put out just a West of Memphis documentary about some circumstantial evidence. We're actually going to put together a case file and release that as a documentary. I don't know, but I just feel like based on what their documentary West of Memphis said, I mean, it just seemed like definitive statements like we can do more and we will do more and we'll get answers and justice, and it just doesn't seem like they've done much.
If anybody out there finds any information regarding the possible theory discussed here earlier today, just go to our blog and leave that information there, and I'm sure there's links and stuff that you could add to your insights into the case.